2020 was honestly the worst year of my life. I'm not going to get into all of it, but I'll say this. I went into that year already broken. I lost my daughter on December 27th, 2019, 4 days before the new year. So when people were out celebrating and doing whatever, I was somewhere I didn't want to be, feeling like I'd left part of myself behind. My sister took me in. She and her husband had a big house in the suburbs, nice neighborhood, the kind of place that always smells clean. They both worked internationally, so most of the time it was just me there alone. I wasn't working. I wasn't doing much of anything, really. I'd wake up, make coffee, sit by the window for a while, maybe watch TV. That was most of my days. My sister was good about it. She didn't push me. She'd call to check in, ask me to run errands here and there, grocery runs, pharmacy pickups, nothing major. It gave me something to do, a reason to get up and put clothes on. Then one day she called and gave me a shopping list that felt off. Baby formula, children's vitamins, a small blanket. I read it back to her like, is there something you want to tell me? She laughed a little and said something like, if you want to own a horse, learn how to drive. I didn't know what that meant. I still don't, honestly. I figured she was just being weird, maybe buying things for a friend or a charity. I didn't push it. I bought the stuff and left it in the kitchen like she asked. A few weeks passed, nothing unusual. I'd gotten used to the size of the house, the way sound moved differently in big spaces, the way certain rooms felt colder. I'd stopped noticing most of it. Then one evening, I was sitting in the dining room eating leftover pasta, and I got this feeling. I know how that sounds, but it was real, like someone was watching me from behind. I turned around and nothing was there, just a hallway and the dark end of it. I sat for a second, chewed slowly, looked around. Everything looked normal. I told myself it was nothing. Being alone too long does things to your head. That night I showered before bed. The water was running and I had music going low on my phone. Then under the music I heard something. I turned the shower off, stood there dripping, not moving. It came again, whistling, soft, kinda tuneless. It was right outside the bathroom door. I didn't move for maybe a full minute. I stood there trying to convince myself it was pipes. Old houses make noise. The wind was picking up outside. It could have been anything. But it came again. 3 short notes, almost like someone calling out without using words. I wrapped a towel around myself and just stood by the door listening. Eventually it stopped. I pressed my ear against the wood and heard nothing. I waited another few minutes, then cracked the door open. Empty hallway. Nothing out of place. I called 911 anyway. I told the dispatcher I thought someone was in my house. 2 officers came out, walked the perimeter, checked every door and window. No forced entry, no signs of anyone. They said they'd increase patrols in the area and recommended I install security cameras. I thanked them and stood in the doorway watching their car pull off. I called my sister. She was shaking when I told her, more than I expected. She said she was coming in the morning. She showed up early, brought coffee and an installer. We had cameras up by noon. Front door, back door, the driveway. Before she left that evening, she handed me something wrapped in cloth. I unwrapped it, and it was a handgun. She showed me how to use the safety, where to keep it, told me not to hesitate if something felt wrong. Then she said she'd stay the night before heading back out. We went out for dinner that evening. Nothing fancy, a diner about 10 minutes away. We sat across from each other and talked about small things, her work, the weather, a show she'd been watching. I remember she ordered pie and I didn't finish mine. By the time we got back to the house, it was close to 11. Cold out, clear sky. She went upstairs. I stayed on the couch with the TV on low, the gun on the cushion next to me. I wasn't asleep. I wasn't really watching anything either, just existing in that half-awake state where you're aware of every creak in the floor. Then my sister screamed. It wasn't a short scream. It lasted long enough that I was already up and moving by the time it ended. I heard footsteps, fast, bare feet on hardwood, and then someone came flying down the stairs. Not my sister, a girl. Young, maybe late teens, barefoot, hair matted and uneven like it hadn't been cut in months. She had on a dirty shirt that was too big for her, torn at the collar. She didn't look at me. She didn't stop. She ran straight past me toward the basement door, yanked it open, and was gone. I stood there for a second. I don't know why I didn't move immediately. I think part of me was trying to process what I'd just seen. I dialed 911. My sister came downstairs shaking, and we stood together in the kitchen until the officers arrived. They went down to the basement, and I followed. What they found down there was, I don't even know how to describe it without it sounding made up. Stacked canned food along the wall, a folded blanket in the corner, some pill bottles and the baby things, the formula, the vitamins, the small blanket I'd bought weeks ago at my sister's request. She was gone. Basement window was open, screen pushed out. That's how they figured she'd been getting in and out, probably for a long time before I ever noticed anything. While we were still standing there, one of the officers pulled up the camera footage on his tablet. The cameras had only been up for about a day at that point, but it was enough. There was a time stamp from earlier that afternoon while my sister and I were out at the diner. The footage showed the basement door opening on its own, then her. She walked out, calm, barefoot, like she knew the layout of the house by heart. She went to the kitchen, stayed there for a few minutes, then moved toward the stairs and went up. Just like that. No hesitation, no rushing, like she'd done it 100 times before. That's the part that stayed with me. Not the running, not the scream, the way she moved through that house while we were gone, slow and comfortable like it was hers. They never found her. My sister never fully explained the shopping list. When I brought it up again later, she said she'd heard something in the basement a while back, thought it might be an animal, and didn't want to worry me. I don't know if I believe that. I'm not sure it matters. What I keep thinking about is that feeling in the dining room, the whistling outside the door, all those evenings I spent alone in that house thinking I was the only one in it. I lost my brother Jaden on September 3rd, 2017. I carry that date everywhere, not just because he's gone, but because of everything around how he went. No justice, no answers, no witnesses that led anywhere. Just a phone call from the police and a case that never closed. This is what I know. It was the summer of 2017. I had been living alone in North Carolina, working in tech, spending most of my days in front of a screen. At some point, I started craving something different, a change of scenery, somewhere to decompress, and I quickly thought of my brother, Jaden. He lived alone in Georgia with his cat, plus we hadn't seen each other in a while. Just as I was thinking about it, my phone rang, and it was him. We talked for a while, catching up the way brothers do when too much time has passed. When I told him I was thinking of coming to stay with him, he got excited, said come through. So the following week, I drove down. His neighborhood was quiet, nice even, the kind of place you wouldn't think twice about. His apartment was decent, kept up. He seemed fine when I first got there. But something was off from the start. Me and Jaden had always been able to sit and talk for hours. That week we barely managed 10 minutes at a time. He was quiet in a way that felt deliberate, not relaxed quiet, guarded quiet. In the nights I could hear him pacing back and forth, sometimes for what felt like an hour. One night I heard him stop at the front door, just standing there. I don't know if he was looking through the peephole or just listening. When I asked him the next morning if everything was good, he said yeah, and changed the subject before I could follow up. I noticed he checked his phone constantly, never left it face up, never took calls in the same room as me. Nobody came to visit him the whole week I was there, not one person. For a man living alone in a city, that felt strange to me, but I didn't push. I want to be honest about something. My brother had a past. He'd been affiliated with some people he shouldn't have been affiliated with, done some things I won't go into here. But he had been working to become better, and I believed he was. The man I saw that week wasn't running from anything, as far as I could tell. He was just quiet, carrying something he wasn't ready to put down yet. On the morning of Saturday, I heard him on the phone with someone. He sounded pretty distressed, like whoever was on the other end was pissing him off. He told me he was leaving, said he'd be back Tuesday, didn't say where he was going. The way he'd been acting all week, I knew better than to ask. I just said okay, and honestly, I was happy to have 3 days alone. That Saturday, I was alone in his apartment. I have a habit with substances I'm not proud of. After I popped what I popped, I blacked out on the couch. I woke up around 1 a.m. and realized I'd been out for a while. The house was in complete darkness, not a light anywhere. I grabbed my flashlight phone and checked outside. The rest of the block had power. Just Jaden's place was out. I went to the garage, found the circuit breaker, flipped it back on, and went back to the living room. I sat on the couch, still feeling the hangover. The apartment was quiet. I looked around, half conscious, just to keep a mental note of where Jaden's cat was. I don't know why, but my eyes lingered toward the TV. The TV was switched off, but I noticed something off, like the TV was reflecting someone or something. I stared at it for a second, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It looked like a figure, standing still, just behind where I was sitting, not moving. I glanced around, or I should say I turned back. Nothing there. I sat with that for a moment, told myself it was the substances, that my brain was still half gone. I almost laughed about it. I turned back toward the TV. The reflection was gone. Then I heard a loud thud and everything went black. I had been struck on the back of my head. What came after that I can only describe in pieces: sounds without context, light that was too bright, a voice I recognized but couldn't place. At some point, I understood I was in a bed. At some point, I understood the pain in my head was real and not going away. 3.5 weeks passed. I wasn't there for any of it. When I finally came back, the first thing I saw was my mom, my siblings, people who lived in Maine standing in a hospital room in Georgia. At this point, my head was spinning. I was completely lost. I was trying to make sense of all that was happening at once. What I found out later was this. A neighbor had seen someone run out of Jaden's apartment that night. He thought it was a burglar, so he came to check. He found me unconscious on the floor and got me to the hospital. Then he called Jaden. Jaden came. He was there when I woke up. He paid the hospital bills. He sat with me. He called my mom and told her what happened and stayed until family arrived. The first week of my coma, my brother was in that hospital making sure I was taken care of. I didn't know any of that while it was happening. I was unconscious, but he was there. By the second week, he was gone. They found his body in a bush near that area. He'd been shot 16 times. 6 of those shots were to his face. When my family went to identify him, his face was barely recognizable. I was still in a coma when it happened. I came home from the hospital to a house full of family and the kind of silence that tells you before anyone says a word that something is permanently wrong. When they told me, I just went numb. The pain I'd been feeling from my own injuries just stopped mattering. The police came. They took a report. At one point, they brought in someone they thought was connected to Jaden's past, questioned him, let him go. There was a car seen near the apartment that night that matched something in their system. It led somewhere for about 2 weeks, and then it didn't. Nobody ever told us why it stopped. That's the part that sits with me. Not that they didn't find anything, but that something almost became something and then just quietly disappeared the same way he did. The person who ran out of Jaden's apartment that night was never identified. The person who struck me was never found. The person who killed my brother was never caught. And Jaden's cat was never found either. I asked one of the neighbors about her weeks later. She said she hadn't seen the cat since before everything happened. Said she used to see it sitting in Jaden's window sometimes in the evenings. After that Saturday, she never saw it again, not once. I don't know what that means. I just know that cat was the last living thing in that apartment with me that night, and she's gone the same way he's gone, and nobody has an explanation for either one.